We would just like to thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to this keynote presentation by Professor Tara Brabazon. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which this presentation will be shared. So I'm meeting today on Gubbi Gubbi or Kabi Kabi land. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge that these lands were never ceded, that these always were and always will be Aboriginal lands. So today's topic, the keynote presentation today, is to begin with the end in mind. How to finish a PhD quickly, meaningfully and powerfully. I think that's terribly important, isn't it? Because we can all do things very quickly. We can do things in a surface way, but we don't necessarily engage with that deep, meaningful kind of importance or power in our research and our application of our research in doing so. So this is not just about speed. This is also about rigor and about commitment and about application. So it's presented by Professor Tara Brabazon. And the topic, I'll just give you a really brief summary of the topic. Has there been a tougher time to complete a PhD? A pandemic PhD was never part of the plan-demic. This exciting presentation by internationally esteemed Professor Tara Brabazon offers concrete strategies for students, wherever they are in their candidature, to add speed, meaning, and power to their progress. Every PhD is different, and because every PhD student is different, therefore, Tara will activate 10 strategies to focus, pivot, move, and transform. So let's tell you a little bit about Tara. I'm not going to be able to summarize all of Tara's achievements and her incredible contribution to higher education within these few moments that I have. Tara Brabazon is the Professor of Cultural Studies at Flinders University and has attained an Order of Australia for her contribution to higher education. Tara, I forget how many PhD students you've supervised, but I'll ask you that in just one moment. I know it's a phenomenal number. Tara has worked at 9 universities across 4 countries and has held the roles of Dean, Head of School and Head of Department. She's published 20 books and over 250 refereed articles. I don't know how you find the time. Her 2 most recent books are 12 Rules for Academic Life, a stroppy feminist's guide through teaching, learning, politics, and Jordan Peterson, and Comma, How to Restart, Reclaim and Reboot Your PhD. We are so honoured and so looking forward to seeing this presentation, hearing this presentation and engaging with our HDR students, both within the School of Business and Creative Industries and elsewhere. Welcome, Tara.
Oh, Gail, thank you so much. It is a joy to be with you, and I'm just doing the weird share screening, multitasking as I go. And so, yes, I have completed 189 PhD students, with 1 student currently under examination. Those of you that know Alyssa Armstrong, who may or may not be on this call, she is my 189th. So what a privilege, what a privilege, what a joy. So Gail, are you happy? And colleagues, can you hear me? And can colleagues see everything? Are you all comfortable? SC, are you comfortable?
So can I just
very comfortable, yes.
So can I just present some etiquette before we start, if that's okay with everybody? So please, if you have any questions, you have any insights, be generous with your questions, be generous with your insights, because people don't know what they don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I don't know what I don't know. And when somebody raises that question, it actually provides an opportunity to surface that which we need to know that we don't yet know. So please ask that question. It's a very generous, collegial process. Also provide your insights. We can learn from each other. So we really do value your use of the chat throughout. And then towards the end of the session, there'll be opportunity for us to ask certain questions of Tara, and also to potentially look at some of those insights that were raised in the chat to further explore and discuss those. So we really do value your contribution through that process, both through the chat initially and then orally afterwards. So thank you, Tara.
Thank you all. So let's crack on. And I am so excited and so thrilled to be with you today. Big shout out to all the crew that's joined us from around the world, and particularly for our colleagues from the University of the Sunshine Coast. A big chunk of my heart and some of my best friends in the universe work for this remarkable institution. And the fantastic Claire asked the students at the University of the Sunshine Coast what they would like me to talk about. So I take requests. And the amazing and dominant and mainstream query that most of the students from the University of Sunshine Coast asked me was as follows. They saw the PhD as a marathon, and they were frightened that it was a marathon that they just were not able to complete. So I don't know if I'm talking about and with you today, if this is your experience too, that it's going on and on and on, and you just don't know if you've got the gumption, you've got the courage, you've got the motivation to bring it home. So with a bit of luck, that might be you. So today we're going to address that query. And so, yes, I'm going to enact some training for you for that marathon, and I'm basically your personal trainer to guide you through that process. Now, we need to start probably with COVID-19. COVID-19 has revealed some very uneven outcomes for PhD students. Some PhD students, probably most PhD students, have been moved down. There's been ethics issues, ethic modifications, data collection in some fields has been an absolute nightmare. But for other crew, COVID-19 was an absolute blessing because they suddenly had all this available time to use and explore. So, for example, people using unobtrusive research methods or digital ethnography suddenly had a lot of people at home with time on their hands. And of course, the time they could enact research has been increased because they had no time to spend on commuting anymore. And the joy and the blessing that is university meetings transformed radically. So we just could beam into a meeting and beam out of a meeting and be terribly efficient. But I am aware that whether you had plenty of time through the pandemic or you had a lot of problems finding time in the pandemic, that revealed a diversity of social variables. So if you had caring responsibilities, if you had childcare responsibilities, you were unemployed, you were underemployed, you were managing homelessness or poverty, your pandemic was a very different one. So these inequalities were raced, they were gendered, they were sexualized, and they were classed. And they manifest differently in regions and indeed in different nations. Many nations have very, very different pandemics. But the differentiation, colleagues, is clear. Some researchers, just like some PhD students, did very well through the pandemic. And a lot of researchers produced a lot more research during the pandemic. And some suffered a lot. So it was dependent on opportunities. So there was a group that could work incredibly hard. They couldn't go out, they stayed home, they completed their PhD, and we wish them well. We wish them well. But there's a very large group that hasn't done well. And there is no doubt that time matters for a PhD, because PhDs and research masters are what we call a time-based degree. That means you don't enroll in it by terms or semesters. You enroll and the clock commences on your candidature. You're not really organised by an academic calendar. And each PhD student has a different clock. Two students that happen to enrol on the same day may submit on a very different day. One may be part-time, one might be full-time. They may swap around. There may be sick leave. You may suspend the candidature for a period. You may have parental. You may have carers leave. And these events are called variations. So what the variation does is it alters the clock of your PhD. And these variations mean every single one of you has a different PhD. Now, universities, sadly, confuse standards with standardization. So there is an assumption, yes, we have a standard for a PhD and we'll all get to that standard in the same way. Yeah, no. Okay. So there is an assumption that we're all going to reach the scope and the scale of a PhD that's required. You're going to have your SOC, your significant original contribution to knowledge, and that a minimum time is required, often between 3 and 4 years in different national systems. But, you know, there is also a maximum time, and trust me, if you haven't finished your PhD in 10 years, mate, save yourself. Seriously, save yourself. Get out, find a life. But this confusion of standards with standardization impacts on you as high degree students because every single one of you is special. Every single one of you has had a different journey to get you here. You are different. Now, I certainly, who is this person? Who is this person? SC, do not take this photograph. Now, I finished my PhD really quickly. I finished it in 18 months full time. Now, what that meant was I was enrolled full time for 1 year and part time for 1 year while I was in full time work. And that added up the clock to 18 months. So in time-based PhD land, that was 18 months. Now, there was only one reason I had to finish it that quickly, and that is I needed to have a PhD to get a job. The job market then, like now, was intensely competitive, and if I didn't have a PhD, I wouldn't have got the next post. So I worked unbelievably hard, got up very, very early in the morning, worked all weekend, didn't go anywhere. It was very, very dull. But I was lucky. I had a clear project. I had a clear SOC, significant original contribution to knowledge, and I went for it because I had no alternative. No PhD, no job. And that focuses the mind. So as you can see, reaching academic standards, you've got lots of different ways to get there. It has little to do with the standardization of the processes to reach those standards. Now, I want you to succeed. The whole reason I've written this gig for you today is I want you to get a PhD quickly and punch forward your career and your life. I don't want you sitting back, spinning your wheels, blocking yourself from career advancement. And I want you to move with publishing and move with decency and integrity into the next stage of your life. The risk is always with a quick PhD, as Gail talked about, the risk is always scope and scale. Now, what that means is, have you actually got enough in the thesis to allow it to pass? And that's a judgment call. Now, this is a legitimate risk, can I say. As an examiner, a PhD examiner, I have failed 3 PhDs in my entire career. I've marked over 200, but 3 of them have failed. So let me tell you about those failures. All of them were failed on the grounds of scope and scale. And that means in the case of these 3 theses, they looked more like an honours thesis than a PhD. For our crew in North America, looked more like a capstone thesis than a PhD. And what does that mean? Well, the reference list, there was a reference list, a bibliographical problem. It was incredibly short. And there was also a theory issue. The theory was pitched way too low. It was derivative rather than dealing with original theory. The methodologies were naive, they were basic, and there was no disciplinary literacy. So the organisation of the thesis was a mess, and I couldn't tell exactly what new knowledge was being created here. So this is the risk with the early submission. So make sure that the scope and the scale is there. Make sure the fundamentals, information literacy, research integrity, make sure they're there, and that your original contribution to knowledge is clear. The second sentence of your abstract must read, my original contribution to knowledge is 1 sentence. So submit early because you've produced work of quality. You've reached the standard, probably not through standardisation. So therefore, let's get into this. Let me today be your personal trainer and tell the really tough truth that probably few people are able to tell you about how to get this thesis home, and also how to get the thesis submitted with your life and your family and your integrity intact. So let's talk about that final year of the PhD, and indeed how you plan out that final year of the PhD. The PhD presents all sorts of challenges and barriers and opportunities and issues, but it is basically a 3-year process. And the entire success of that 3 or 4 year process is determined by a singular examination moment. Now, if you think about it, it's one of the few achievements in our life where we mortgage so much of our time and energy and effort for one outcome. And of course, that reality, 3 years, 4 years of our life for one outcome, that's what adds the stress and the worry and the despair and probably a fair amount of self-disgust, because the final year of the PhD is an absolute nightmare. For supervisors, for students, it's intense, it's disturbing, it's emotional, and it's intellectually taxing. So what I'm going to do is hopefully give you 10 strategies that you can use today to change your way of thinking, change your way of being a researcher, to move you to that deadline. And let's start with number 1. Planning is everything. Now, I've always said in my life about PhDs and about life more generally, we need to start with the end in mind. But the first 2 years of your candidature must lead with full consciousness into the first year. Now, I know we've got colleagues that have just started their PhD this week and you've come into the session, and that's terrific. From your first week, I need you to think about your 3rd year. And we've got a lot of people that are right at the end of their thesis now, okay? So what I want you to do, right from the start, if you're nearing the end, I want you to use milestones and deadlines to your advantage, because the students that finish quickly do their milestones on time. And I can't be any clearer than that. When I'm diagnostically assessing a student that's in trouble, the first thing I do is I look at the timeline for their milestones. And the students that are in trouble have had trouble reaching deadlines. So what I want you to do through the entirety of the candidature is use the small deadlines. So put in an application to be part of a conference, that's great. Write that paper, deliver that paper, use that deadline. Get into an edited book series, do that, that's fantastic. Write a refereed article and reach and meet those deadlines. And make sure, this is the important bit, every single word you write can be used in the thesis somewhere, even in the appendix. So what I want you to do is make every sentence that you write a winning sentence. Be efficient with every proposal, every publication, every presentation that you write. So what are the key challenges that you will confront? Well, as you're entering your final year, colleagues, you'll have all your data or most of your data. Now, at the start of the final year, you need to assess your data set and you need to look for the gaps and look for the challenges in the data set. Now, of course, everyone gets a bit sick when they do school. Oh, I've asked the wrong questions, or that survey was a bit dodgy, or. Now, colleagues, examiners love problems with the data set. We love it. We love issues. Oh, we love problems. So don't think, oh, there's a problem in my data set, I'll fail. It's the exact opposite. You've got a problem with your data set, just sit in the problem. Bathe yourself in the problem. Explain the problem. Describe how it happened and its meaningfulness to data sets. And examiners will lose their mind. So make sure if you've got issues and problems, put the problem into the work. Explain the gaps. Explain the inconsistencies. Similarly, at the start of the final year, I want you to sit back, take a breath, have a big coffee, see how I deal with coffee, have a big coffee, and I want you to diagnose the strengths and the weaknesses of your own thesis. So that means I want you to start the final year going, what is great in this thesis, and list that down. But then the most important bit actually is list the weaknesses or the challenges. And what you have to do in the final year is mitigate or manage or massage those weaknesses. So the way to stop feeling overwhelmed by the work left to do is simply list the tasks that you have completed and the tasks left to complete. Now, long candidatures cause a lot of problems. Yes, money. Yes, universities are unstable. And yes, supervisors leave or die. But long candidatures also creates incredible problem with motivation. How could any of us be that interested in one topic for that length of time? Some people's PhDs have lasted longer than my marriages. Sort yourself out. So remember, start the PhD seeing the ending, and that will allow you to sustain motivation and good behavioural patterns. Get up in the morning, come on, get up in the morning, because you are one morning closer to getting that thesis completed. Come on, dig deep, come on, work hard. And what that will do is allow you to see your progress at speed, so you won't get lost in worry. So, 2, be clear in your priorities. Oh yeah. Now, one of the great reasons that PhDs blow out in terms of time, or students intermit or they suspend, is they start to lose their way. What are their priorities? Remember, you are writing a PhD, so everything else is really a secondary priority. Publications, secondary. Teaching, secondary. Everything, secondary. Your number one priority is the completion of a PhD as quickly as possible. Remember, this is important, saying no is an empowered decision. Saying no is an empowered decision. Don't say yes because you're embarrassed or you're fearful. Say no to everything except the thesis. Now, I used to walk through coffee shops in Fremantle in Western Australia, this posh coffee bohemian area, right? When I worked at Murdoch University in Western Australia. And I'd be walking down the coffee strip on the Esplanade, and I'd see sort of people I know. Ralph, how you going, mate? What are you doing? I'm doing a PhD, Tara. Michael, mate, haven't seen you in ages. What's going on? Oh, I'm doing a PhD. Sandra, I haven't seen you in 10 years. What are you doing? Oh, I'm doing a PhD. Doing a PhD is fine, but finishing the PhD, that's the accomplishment. So what I want you to do is go into every intermission, every suspension in your candidature with your eyes open. Now, around the world, students have systems when things go wrong. So something bad happens in your life and you can suspend your candidature. You can intermit from your enrolment for a period. Now, that's absolutely fine, and on a lot of occasions, that's the right thing to do. But what's changed is the contemporary university sector. So I need you to go into that intermission or suspension with your eyes wide open. If you disconnect from your candidature, your enrolment, for 3 months or 6 months, do not think you'll have business as usual when you return to your enrolment. So go into any intermission, any suspension, knowing that your supervisory team may be different when you re-enter that institution. Now, I'm telling you this, it's a difficult, dark truth, because I want you as early in your candidature as possible to work as hard as you can. While it's stable, give yourself a fighting chance of finishing. Now, there are many reasons why I want students to finish the PhD quickly. One is so that you get your lives back. Another reason is so that your family gets their lives back. But the second, third reason is even more important. And that is that we live in incredibly unstable times for higher education, and your supervisory advisory team may not be available when you return. The longer you are enrolled, the less likely you are to have an intact supervisory panel. 3, it's only a PhD. It's not your life work. Now, research never ends. A PhD could go on forever and ever. Can you imagine? But remember, the best PhDs are bounded PhDs. They have a frame around them. And therefore, you get a clear sense of the ending of that doctorate. It's not your best research. It's your first research. It's your worst research. Now, if you are walking into a topic where there's going to be a lengthy ethics protocol and modifications and queries, then you know you're not going to finish that PhD in a timely fashion. Now, I see so many students propose a topic that actually they're not going to be able to finish, and they're certainly not going to be able to finish quickly. So if you want a quick PhD, then you know what? Choose the topic really carefully. Choose a topic where ethics is straightforward to obtain. Now, I understand that COVID has scuppered so many topics, colleagues, but for those of you starting now, for those of you in your first year, remember the last 2 years and go into this situation with your eyes wide open. Your PhD is not the best research you will ever complete. It is the worst research you will ever complete. It's a qualification. It's a degree. Degrees start and degrees finish. So let's do the cliche. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Now, you may want to do a quick PhD, but then, you know, life happens. Bad things happen to just about everybody that's enrolled in a PhD. People die, people get sick, housing insecurity, poverty, you name it, it's happened. But some of the truths that we're talking about today to do this quick PhD also can work very well in a conventional length of a PhD. And the best advice I can give you is learn from our part-time students. Work in spurts. So when you're sailing well and everything's okay, work hard. Go full throttle. Give it everything. Now, I've seen so many people with caring responsibilities. So you think they've got the least time, but they use this spurt method with incredible effectiveness. So, you know, they go, I have a day, unbelievably, I've got a day to do my PhD. I'm going to go for it on this day. Tomorrow is not promised. I'm going to work hard this day. Or indeed, I've got an hour. Before school pickup, I've got an hour. Let's make it an hour of power, right? So these spurts you can connect up. And when you connect the spurts up, that becomes the PhD. And it can also create insurance for tough times. Maxim 4. Talk about your feeling. And remember, your supervisor is not a god. Your supervisor is a hashtag random. Okay? This is the big one. Now, PhDs are isolating. They make you feel like you're alone, you're despairing, and no one understands you. And sometimes that's actually true. But please express this feeling to your supervisors. All of us know that the final year of a PhD is a shocker, is a terrible year. And most of us have been through it multiple times. I've been through it 189 times. So express your feelings. And when you do that, we can help you come up with solutions. There are strategies. So please don't suffer. Don't seethe. Express. And let your supervisors help you, because your feelings really do matter. So manage the emotions. One crucial bit of advice I'd give you is the stress will drain away from your life if you can hammer into that first draft. The dream is always get the first full rough draft done, and the feeling, the excitement, the relief you will have will change your life. So slam into that first draft, and then there's all sorts of strategies we can deploy and help you to get you home. So manage your emotions. Don't stay in anger. Don't stay in rage. Now, most of the students that I see and talk to me, and I get thousands of emails most days, but most of the students I see or hear from, they blame their supervisor for something. So lack of feedback, authorship issues, and lack of teaching career opportunities are the most common. Now, to give you a great example, I don't take a lot of leave. In fact, I very rarely take leave. But I had a student complain when I cancelled one meeting when I had my honeymoon with my husband, Professor Jamie Quinton. And this student, when I cancelled one meeting, wrote to the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research about me cancelling the meeting. So as you can see, students are very locked into what the supervisor should be doing. And this sort of blocks a realisation about what the student should be doing. The reason I finished my 3 research degrees basically without supervision and very quickly is I had no interest in judging the supervisor's behaviour or complaining at all. I didn't have time to complain. I just had to get on with it, right? So what the supervisor did or did not do at the end of the day is actually irrelevant because I had to finish for my future. You have to finish for your future. Anger, complaining won't finish the thesis. Reading and research and writing, that'll finish the thesis. And I think too many students are relinquishing power to their supervisor, this supposed all-knowing messiah. Supervisors are people. We're randoms, all right? And you're a very bright person. So work hard. Come on. Commit to the work. Create productive patterns and back yourself. It is your responsibility to maintain the daily patterns of work. And don't rely on your supervisor to push you. You've got to have that push. Come on. You must be self-motivated. And to be honest, there's all sorts of stuff about motivation at the moment, isn't there? Every second book's on motivation. Motivation means very little unless it triggers behaviours that you can rely on. So motivation is great, but create the behaviours from it. If you're going to supervise yourself, you need a plan. You need a plan, Stan, and you need to guarantee that you will enact particular behaviours. Now, I finished all my research degrees while in full-time work. I got up early. There was no plan B. I had to finish, just had to finish. And the only person I could rely on was myself. And if you think about it, that's not only a truth of doctoral education, it's a truth of international higher education right now. It is your thesis. You have to do the work. And the only person you can rely on is yourself. But what I want you to do is I want you to believe that you can do it, okay? You don't need a supervisor to allow you to believe in yourself. Now, be grateful for any support that you receive. And the supervision that I received in my career would not happen now. The supervisor would be under report, they'd be shamed throughout social media, and the scrutiny would be different. Supervisors these days have to have mandatory training. They complain about it, but they have to have mandatory training. And students complain a lot. And even, for example, when a supervisor misses a meeting for a honeymoon, so a complaint culture is in place. But instead of investing in this complaint culture, which places all the attention on your supervisor and what they're doing wrong, I want you to focus on yourself. Focus on your thesis. Instead of being disappointed about what you're not receiving, be thankful for what you are receiving. So to this day, I'm incredibly grateful to all those supervisors I had because they taught me how not to supervise. And you know what? I wouldn't be who I am now if they'd been good supervisors. Have a think about that. Maxim 5, learn the lessons from the earlier degrees. Research training is never wasted. Okay. Policymakers and people like me use the phrase research training a lot. I hate the phrase research training. It was been used in Australia for about the last 20 years, and it's basically just rubbish. But the problem is the phrase research training has real and meaningful content within it. And let's talk about what research training actually means. It represents something enormous. Now, I was trained properly. What a ridiculous word. Let's get rid of trained. I was educated. I was taught properly. I had remarkable teachers at the undergraduate honours level who taught me skills, meta skills, methodology, epistemology, and ontology. So then I could test those abilities in a research master's, which I finished in 2 years, and therefore I had research training, and I was able to throw myself into a PhD and finish. So you know the cliche, hit the ground running? Yeah. So this means for you, every opportunity you have to learn how to read, how to take notes, how to write, to learn about research, MOOCs, everything, you take that opportunity, because it means you will have those meta skills. You'll have the research skills to enable you to be efficient and be productive to finish that thesis. Days, weeks, months of your life will not be wasted trying to sort out EndNote, spelling checkers, footnotes, or my personal favourite, you know, the bullet point alignment. You know, when you're there and you just, yeah, days of your life can be spent trying to get one bullet point in place. Get the training so you know how to do it. Make sure with a year to go, you have the hardware in place. You've got a computer that is stable, you've got 2 external hard drives, and you email yourself the thesis once a week. And finally, do a wetware checkup. Have you got the information literacy skills that you need? Go to the library. Use our extraordinary librarians. Librarians are the Jedi Knights of our universities. They are trained, they are educated to help you. So use their help. Make sure you've got the information literacy that you need. Maxim 6. Oh, yes. Make sure that you've read the university's regulations. Always exciting reading. Now, when we start a PhD, colleagues, we start with assumptions. This is what a PhD could be. But a completion of a PhD and an examination of a PhD is based on regulations, not a vibe, regulations. So at the start of your final year, I need you to look at the PhD policies for completion and examination for your institution, okay? Be clear about the length of the thesis, the structure of the thesis, and how the publications in the thesis are to be logged, and how authorship and co-authorship is to be logged. I've seen so many students, the day they are submitting, have none of the documents required to actually submit, because they didn't know what actually a submitted PhD looks like. So students have problems completing a PhD because they get overwhelmed by all these variables. It's like a Mount Everest that they can never reach. But actually, a PhD is made up from daily, routine, pretty mediocre activities, completely predictable tasks. So today, focus on reading the article, reading that policy, writing notes, writing the paragraph. Leave Mount Everest to Tenzing. Do not underestimate the importance of your health. Right. Never neglect exercise, food quality, your health, because mental health is based on physical health. No matter how busy you are, you take an hour a day and you go for a walk. Now, I use Fitbits, I use iWatches to provide the technological determinant to get me moving. So 10 minutes every hour, this thing goes, get off your clacker, girlfriend, get moving. Ooh, so always remember, movement in ideas is founded on movements from your body. Create this wide support structure for health and well-being beyond your supervisor. You are the star of your own life. You are the star of your own thesis. So assemble a community of support from the first week of your candidature. Meet the librarians, enroll in training, see courses, Find friends, find colleagues. Do not think you're going to cook meth. Meet your higher degree coordinators, meet your dean. The academics that make professional development available for you, contact them. If there's something that you need, contact them and they will provide it for you. So gather support services. Learning is never wasted. So get learning. And the reason we learn is so that we know what we don't know. So get proactive, get learning, surround yourself with people who hold expertise, and then you're going to be able to supervise yourself. Never isolate yourself. And remember, it's the other important bit, you are not your thesis. You are not your thesis. I think students get confused between their research and their identity. Now, that's why I think students get cross and distraught and confused when a supervisor walks away from them or just sort of drifts away, because they assume the supervisor is not interested in them, and so they take it as a personal rejection. But always remember to treat your thesis as a job. And please do not romanticize our universities. Seriously, do not romanticize higher education. They are workplaces, and they're pretty troubled workplaces at the moment. So treat your research as work that is separate from your identity. Recognise that many supervisors can't save themselves at the moment. With the best will of the world, those supervisors may be made redundant, and then how they can pay their mortgage is more important than your thesis. You may not want to believe this, but this is true. So if you're going to finish this thesis, you may have to finish it with very little supervision. That is the nature of higher education today. You're going to have to grind out a result. Won't be pleasant. It's work. So do the work. 8, have a career and plan for it. Now, there's no doubt you've got to complete that thesis. That is an absolute priority. But one way to manage the stress and the emotions on the way through is to have a sense of the career beyond the PhD. So I make sure my students have a plan for the doctorate after they've submitted. I take one meeting, 1 week a year, and the students and I work very strongly on their future. So we sketch out exactly what the examination period for the PhD looks like. So what are they going to do during the examination period? And then what happens the month after the examination, 3 months, 6 months, a year. And that creates scenario planning for all the different options. So it calms the future down. But the key truth is that a PhD is the foundation for any future career. Just over 1% of the world's population hold a PhD. You are that special. And without that PhD, you're minimising your chances for the sort of future that you want and you deserve. But you're going to increase your career chances, reduce the stress by talking through scenarios with your colleagues. So short PhDs are probably all that's possible for students right now. Money is tight, yeah? Oh yeah, funding is tight. And I've seen so many students, thousands of students that have a scholarship and don't finish their PhD, don't finish their research when the scholarship finishes. Are you with me? And because the research has to keep going without funding, those students cascade into profound mental health concerns, poverty, homelessness, relationship breakdown. So if you need motivation to finish quickly, then you know what? Do it for the money. Seriously, do it for the money. So for those of you that have got a tiny little bit of money, you might be on a scholarship, you might be on soft funding to finish that thesis, colleagues, do whatever you can to finish that thesis while there is any funding available. Because if the funding sources run out, your research will cascade into some challenging and troubling spaces, intellectually, emotionally, and socially troubling spaces. Therefore, a quick PhD is a good PhD. It's good for your bank balance. It's good for your health. Now, I know there's a lot of material that I respect about the work and life balance, well-being, mental fitness. I love all that work. But I have also personally and professionally seen the cost, the deep cost of a long PhD. Please, for me, avoid it if you can. 9, build relationships with your supervisor and beyond. Now, we're very staunch about supervisors today, and I need to be. But there's no doubt a great supervisor can save you years. Yes, years. They know the field, they know what to read, they can help you write, they understand the standard required of a PhD, they're able to read your drafts quickly, they're able to offer clear advice. So those of you that are on the, I won't say prowl, but shopping for a supervisor, few things are important. Make sure this person is intensely research active and check that they continue to learn and participate in professional development. When I've been talking with the wonderful Gail in the last 3 or 4 days to get ready for this gig, Gail has done some of the most amazing professional development I've ever seen. Gail is an inspiration to me, and she's one of the great scholars, I think, on this planet, and that's because she continues to learn. So learn from Gail, be like Dale. Because if you enact professional development, then the supervisors know what they're doing, and you're not wasting time supervising the supervisor. It is important that you continue every week to send key emails, meet new people every week, build Twitter links up, because there's a mantra at the moment that only about 30% of jobs that are available are actually ever advertised, and it might even be lower than that. Therefore, you need to start to meet the important people in the world, and they need to start to know you. So your thesis matters, but the relationships around the thesis matter. So every day, spend 20 minutes building up those linkages for me. So be active on LinkedIn, be active on Twitter, crucial. Tell mates on Facebook, on Insta, that you're looking for work. And as something appears for us, we'll send it your way. And of course, maximum 10. Endings matter. Relationships matter. Your relationship with your PhD students and your peers matter. Working on finishing that relationship is crucial. Now, the supervisory relationship, if it's working well, that person will write you references for 30 years. If it hasn't worked well, they will hurt you for 30 years. So keep it positive. Remember, the PhD supervisor can't do everything for you, but look, they can do something. But they'll do nothing if you breach the relationship. So for all of you on this call, there's so many people here, it's unbelievable. In the final 12 months of the thesis, you are about to finish. What I need to say to you is you really matter. It's probably, you matter more now than probably any generation of PhD students before you. Your research really, really matters. But remember, planning is everything. Planning is important. The completion is crucial. The relationship with the supervisor is crucial, but they are not your spouse. They're not even your friend, to be frank. So keep the relationship professional, decent, and ethical. But I also want you to respect every person that you meet. That includes professional. Remember the story. It was the administrators, it was the professional staff in a graduate school that enabled my completion. The academics failed.
First, Sarah. No, there. First, Sarah.
Julia, darling, I'm hearing you, sweetheart, I think. Is it Julia?
Right here.
Or is it Lisa? Lisa, darling, just watch the microphone for about 1 minute.
Okay, can I just ask people to mute for the moment? If you could mute for the moment and put your question or your comment in the chat, that would be Super helpful. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. So we're nearly done with executive.
Okay, thank you for that beautiful voice. I wonder if we might hear that a bit later, if we could mute during the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. So, colleagues, I really need you to focus on the respect and the care for professional staff, because they're the people that inevitably will get you through. Remember that every single person you meet is important and they deserve your respect. Yeah. Don't ever think that a person is just an administrator, because that administrator could be the person that actually gets your thesis through for you. Because you are supervising yourself, but you've got a whole village around you to support you. Now, I once had a great student that referred to themselves as a self-sourcing pudding. I loved him for that. What a great phrase. But therefore, I want to finish today by talking about the pride of pretty well supervising yourself, being a self-sourcing pudding in difficult times. No complaints, no grumble bumming, getting on with it. Now, my experience of supervising myself has changed my life. I never gave up. I expect poor behaviour from academics, and frequently I see it. I know how to fight. I know how to fight hard. I know how to succeed against the odds every single day. But there's another gift of being a self-sourcing pudding. So let me share that secret with you. When I started my PhD, my supervisor used a truly ridiculous line at me. That because he was supervising me, he would have to be the co-author for all my publications. Now, I was very young, but I was not stupid. And I knew this was rubbish. And I also knew, girlfriend, that was not going to be happening. So because he disconnected, he never read a word of it, and he admitted that he never read a word of it, I published from that thesis completely on my own. And 13 singly authored referee articles came from that PhD. And I got my first 3 contracts from that publishing. So I'll finish with the story of my research master's degree in education. Now, I wrote that entire thesis on my own. I rolled at the start of the semester, never had any engagement with the supervisor. The day before I was submitting, I simply, as a courtesy, sent her the completed thesis. And this thesis, by the way, went on to be my monograph, The University of Google, the book that probably made my name. When I die, it will be Tara Brabazon, comma, the author of The University of Google. Now, the supervisor, upon receiving this document and looking at the title page, said, but there is no University of Google. But she confirmed, even though she didn't understand the title, that she would be the co-author on the publications. Now, this was only 15 years ago. I was a full professor. I held a British chair when she did this to me, and she was an associate professor. Now, that was a major mistake, because I went on to report her to the Dean and the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Research. She had no grounds for the claim, and the email where she confirmed she hadn't read the thesis, didn't even understand the title, was the same email where she said she was going to claim authorship. So this became the major revision of policy at this particular regional university, SC. So if you are a self-made person, a self-sourcing pudding, you produce your own research. And you know what? No one can ever take that away from you. Incompetent supervision gives you the gift of clarity, particularly in a tough time for authorship. There is no doubt it's terrific if you've got a great supervisor. They can write you great references, open doors for publications, open doors for jobs. Great supervisors are brilliant and can change your life. But if you haven't got that, please, for me, don't give up. Supervise yourself. Learn different skills and take great pride that you didn't give up. Shoulders back, head up. And you need to know that you are gaining the skills that will enable the future of international higher education. This future matters, and you are our future. Never question your meaning, or your purpose, or your value. You are the future of our universities. You are that future. You are important, you matter, and all the skills you have gained will carry us to that future. Wonderful, Gail. Back to you, my darling one. Thank you for your time, everybody.
So first of all, thank you so much, Tara. So many insights. The chat has been crazy. It's been going full speed throughout. Lots of thank yous coming in there, Tara. So when you do get a moment, we'll have a look at some of those comments. I was first of all just really interested. There was a bit of debate here around the saying of no. And it was a very powerful statement that it's empowered to say no. And then there was some discussion around the fact that sometimes you have to be in an empowered position to be able to say no. So how do you say no to teaching opportunities or to other work opportunities when you actually need that money, or you need that work to pay your rent, to pay your mortgage, to pay your bills, etc. So there is this, I think this is some complexity around the agency to be able to say no. And I'm just wondering if you want to offer some advice or some insight around that.
Absolutely. And I know, Gail, you came from a pretty tough background. A lot of people on the call came from a tough background. I came from a tough background. I tutored my way through. I worked behind a bar. I tutored my way through university and worked behind a bar through university. So I'm aware you've got to earn a living, and everything I do is about making sure you can earn a living. So yes, you have to say yes to working opportunities, but I want you to be honest too. Say yes to the working opportunities that you need to pay your bills, okay? Because the other thing I always use, and this might help colleagues, is that you've got to ask yourself, what's a year of your life worth? So if a PhD takes 6 years rather than 5 years, or 7 years rather than 6 years, because you've said yes to do the work that you needed to do to pay your bills, or did you get a bit more? What's a year of your life worth? So my line is always, and I live quite a small life. I don't have a lot of moving parts, and I don't have a lot of money going out because you don't know where the next pay is going to come from. So we're all the precariat now. We're all 1 week out from being redundant, basically. So I'm aware that when the work's available, you feel like you need to take it. But what I'd say to you is take the work that you need to pay your bills, and not much more than that, because remember, the longer the candidature goes, you're spending your life. You're spending your life. So be aware of the value of time when you're taking those jobs and earning that money. Gail, does that help a little bit? That's always my line on this, is just when students take on a lot of work and they do very little work on their thesis for a year or 2 years or 3, then a PhD takes 10 years. And what's that worth?
Yeah, no, look, it's really powerful. It's really, really good advice. I'd probably add to it as well, if I may, in terms of be circumspect about the type of work that you do as well. If there is a choice, now not everybody has that choice, but if there is a choice to undertake work outside of the university, if you're aspiring to work within the university sector, for example, and there's an opportunity to work within the sector or work outside of the sector, be really mindful about where those networks, those connections, those relationships that you might build up will come from. But also, if you want to become an academic, some teaching experience is really useful. So if there is that opportunity, also think about how you balance paid work with work that's going to really support your academic kind of, or your future aspiration then in the workplace.
And Gail, I'll just add one more line to that if I can. Another way you work out if teaching is useful for you is, yes, you've got to pay the bills, but will this teaching experience add a line to my CV? And so what that means is, don't teach the same course every semester for 3 years. If you can, teach different levels, online, offline, mixed mode, methodology, move around. If it adds a line to your CV, that is a good use of time.
So there's been, we all loved your reference there to who the Jedi Masters are within the university sector, and obviously we've got some here that research data librarians, information literacy support, etc. How might we maximise our opportunity to engage with these folk, to really get the most out of their knowledge and their insights? How do we navigate that relationship? What can we ask of them? What can they help us with?
Oh, look, and Gail, the first thing I do is week 1 of any enrolment, and again, wherever any of our colleagues are on their PhD journey, go in early. I go in first week 1, and please see librarians. And the thing I think people forget, Gail, and I had the privilege of doing a qual in information studies and internet studies, and I was taught by librarians. And people forget that the library training, the library professionals, they spend a lot of their training, their education, teaching other people how to use information. So they have this incredible communication system around them to enable research. So if you're interested in doing a literature review, which I mean, hello, most of us have to, a systematic review, a scoping review, honestly, these professionals can save you months from one meeting by just sharpening the keywords. So if you're interested in keywords, they can show you how to enact the best databases, the best use of Google Scholar, because that's what they do for a living. So I don't think really you should even have a go thinking about how we deal with a literature review without seeing a librarian. So I'd go early and I'd go often, I'd learn their name, and trust me, most universities these days have research librarians and they love seeing PhD students. They love you. So all they want to do, their whole point of being on the planet is to help people do research. So all you have to do is ask them, and they'll be your best friend through the journey.
So I'm going to ask one more question quickly, and then I'm going to open it to the floor if I may. So my question is really about communicating with your supervisors.
Yeah.
When, how, where, why, what relationship in terms of the communication should you be trying to support, try to develop?
Yeah, and I mean, Gail, you're an amazing communicator and an amazing colleague and an amazing academic. You are the model for people to be using that are on this call. So that's the first thing I would say. But Gail, I use, as you know, and there's plenty of online documents that link to this, but I use something called a PhD setup document with all my students, and I get them to fill in what is a 32-page document to talk about their strengths, their weaknesses, how they think the thesis is going to go, what their expectations about the rights and responsibilities of students and supervisors, and they come to the first meeting with those assumptions. So what I think needs to happen in the first meeting is the supervisor and the student need to get together and talk about their assumptions for the relationship and their assumptions for the research project. And as we saw by the research, Gail, the pressure points are feedback, how frequently that can occur, how frequently meetings can take place, what do we do when trouble happens, when health matters happen. Talk through the scenarios, because what we're trying to do, Gail, is the student arrives here and the supervisor has had other supervisions and assume that every supervision is the same, and of course we all know they're not. So what we've got to do is use the meetings, use speaking, use oral communication skills to bring the supervisor and the student so they are speaking the same language. And the earlier that can happen, the better it is and the faster the candidature. If the student and the supervisor never talk about their assumptions, then they're often the relationships that fail and fall over really, really quickly when things start to go dodgy.
And how do you manage that power differential then? Because whether it's a reality or not, it's a perception, isn't it? Or there is a perception perhaps from PhD students that there's a power differential, and maybe they feel that they want to say that which they think their supervisor would like to hear. What advice would you have for HDR candidates in that context?
Isn't it tragic? And Gail, I don't think that has anything to do with PhD students at all. I think that has to do with us as university academics. We haven't worked hard enough to be decent, ethical human beings, because we're no better or greater than anybody else. We're just some random, and we might be good at these particular areas of life, that feed into a particular research culture. I can't manage laundry, right? Okay, I can't manage laundry. I've got no idea what's happening with my car at all. I don't think I've tried to manage a garden for the last 30 years of my life and failed, right? So I don't think it's about students at all. I think if students are feeling disempowered, that is about us as academics, that we haven't we haven't demonstrated ethics of care and decency for citizenship. So students, the best you can do, I think, is just, I mean, I don't want you intimidated. I mean, I think you need to pick supervisors that are good, ethical, decent humans. And I think I did some work for the Times Higher 20 years ago now, nearly 20 years ago now, and they asked me to talk about this. And I said, the number one thing when you're picking a supervisor is make sure they're a decent, ethical human being. Before you deal with anything else about publications and blah, 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 are they a nice human? And if they're not a nice human, then all the great research and research grants and gunna, coulda, shoulda, none of that stuff matters because they're brittle and they'll break. So pick a supervisor carefully, keep the communication systems open and ethical and decent, and be clear about the parameters of the research. But if you're feeling frightened, my goodness me, for the students out there, if you're feeling frightened, that's not about you. That's about me as an academic. That is about us. We have not worked hard enough to make you feel cared for and respected, and that you matter, that you are our future. So that's on us, Gail. That's on us.
Thank you. Kerry, I might ask how many minutes we have for more questions from the floor, please.
Hi, Kerry.
Hi, how is everybody going? We've got a good 10 minutes, I would say, before we need to really close it. Really, thank you so much for your wisdom, Tara. If I may raise a question from Jenny early in the session, I made a note of it, reflecting back on your mention about failures, your small percentage of failures. And Jenny asked, I don't understand how a thesis that can make the grade has failed gets past the supervisory team. How does that happen, was her question.
Oh, and so was that Jen? Was that Jen?
Jenny Care, I've got here as the name on the
G'day.
chat.
G'day, Jen. What a great question that is. So, Jen, how theses that are substandard get through is that people that don't know what they're doing advise students. And you might have 15 people, you know, you might have confirmation of candor and 3 people in. You could have dial a crowd there. You could have 50 people there offering advice on a PhD. But if those 50 people don't know what they're doing, then you're getting bad advice, right? So students, and I do see some poor theses, can I say, from very posh universities too. The 3 that I did fail were from the top end of town, the Russell Group and the Group of 8. So it has nothing to do with the hierarchy of the university. So what it is, Jen, is it's supervisors that don't know the standard. For me, the number one skill I try and teach supervisors is do, and shame them really in some ways, which is terrible, but looking them in the eye and saying, Jen, do you know the difference between a thesis that passes with major corrections and a revise and resubmit? From reading a thesis, do you know the levels? And if they don't, that's how these situations emerge, because you don't allow a thesis through unless you know as a supervisor that you've got a good fighting chance that that's going to get through. Weird stuff does happen every now and again, but a PhD is a genre. It is a genre of writing, and if supervisors don't know that genre, if assessors on the way through in the internal processes don't know the genre, then they'll be saying it's fine, and it ain't fine. So what I think we need to do, Jen, is make sure, I mean, if you're in a dodgy institution, and there's plenty of dodgy institutions out there, but, you know, trust your supervisors. Do they know what they're doing? Seriously, do your supervisors know what they're doing? Bring in external assessors. Gail has been an external assessor for my students, changed some of my students' lives, right? Because she is a woman of ethics, brilliance, and clarity, and her advice has changed their lives. So bring in external assessors, and then try and test yourself as much as possible. Go to conferences, put publications out so that you've got multiple data points to check that you're at standard or at level. But Jan, bottom line, if a poor thesis is getting through, that is a failure of internal institutional policies. Good on you, Jen.
That's great. Thanks, Tara.
Thanks, Tara. I have another question on the chat here from Melissa. Thank you, Melissa. Good to see you here today. So she's really interested to know about the power of connecting with your PhD on a daily basis, regardless of the amount of time that you might have available. That might be as little as 10 minutes, say.
Oh, Melissa, you're a rock star. So you've picked up, because, you know, I've had a lot of PhD students, part-time, full-time, caring responsibilities, people that are incredibly busy. I've got, I think, 4 PhD students over the age of 65 at the moment, and they are amazing humans, but very busy humans. And if you're interested in completing your thesis quickly, the number 1 rule is touch your thesis every day. The moment you make a decision to give it a week, do something else, that's when the problems start. So in some ways, if it's 10 minutes a day, finding a reference, doing a spelling check, checking EndNote, keep connected with the thesis. Go into the document every single day in some form, and then you've got a relationship with it. Because if you start having the space between you and the thesis spread, it's very, very difficult to hook your relationship with the research back together. So stay connected with that document. Doesn't matter if you're checking one reference on one day. Stay connected. That's how you finish. The students that don't finish, they leave it. They leave it, and they have so much emotional baggage to get back and connected with it. Good on you, Melissa.
Thank you, Tara. So we have a question here from Sarah. Sarah, I hope I'm kind of asking this in the right context. I'm understanding this in the context of how you choose that supervisor and the supervisor's kind of ethic, etc. So it's really about the notion of self-branding and inauthentic networking in the neoliberal university, in that it can breed gross competitive behavior. And how do you get around this? Sarah, was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Oh,
I think there's so much anxiety out there at the moment about getting work. It's so precarious, publish or perish, etc. And people are freaking out and thinking that they need to self-brand in this atomized neoliberal university and compete with others, and it's gross. I think the idea of networking itself is pretty gross, Tara. You know, I'm a massive extrovert and I talk to a fence post, so I don't find it hard to make friendships with others. And like you, I also see this as friendships, to collaborate and to build those networks. What would you say about that, Tara? How can people make it about their scholarship rather than these inauthentic, instrumental kinds of connections?
Oh, look, it's horrible. It's absolutely, and I'm loving your phrases. I'm going to cite you on this: inauthentic branding and gross competitive behaviours. Look, competition. Oh, sorry, Dale, go, sweet.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I love a bit of social media, you know that, and I'm all about, you know, getting out there and the bit of the jazz hands, but I do think that we need to be authentic, for want of a better word there. So, sorry, Tara, back to you.
No, Esther, we're the exact same on this. You talk to a fence post. Look, I talk to cutlery and crockery, so don't even worry about it, mate. But what I'd say is, I'm 53, team, so I am close to death, all right? But what I've learned as a 53-year-old is all that matters is relationships. That's it. All that matters in life are relationships. All that matters is authenticity. All that matters is being of service to the culture. So look, neoliberalism it nearly destroyed this globe in 2008. Okay, the global financial crisis pretty well destroyed the planet, and yet from that competitive, excessive, unregulated behaviour, we've continued like a zombie to maintain and continue this failed ideology. Okay, neoliberalism is a failed ideology. What we require is regulation, friendship. We've got to get rid of competition. Competition has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it at all. It's about public good. It's about a commitment to the public, public education, public health, public libraries. If we've had any lesson from the COVID nightmare, it is because we paid the stake to fund those banks in 2008, that public health had been depleted through paying the stake, paying those bankers. That's what happened. And then this depleted public health system had to run a pandemic. Okay, now let's learn from that. And what we learn from that is tough times in universities, but being competitive and in people's faces and that's not going to help your team. That's not going to help you. What will help you is real, authentic compassion, kindness, and decency. And, you know, people will forget your name and how many publications you've got and the funding and all the rest of it. You know what they'll remember? The kindness that you have shown them. So be kind.
Thank you, Tara. That's brilliant.
Love you, darling.
I think
Forever.
we probably have question. We've probably got time for one last question, although there are two really interesting questions. The first question really is not so much a question as a statement. People are identifying here that even towards the end of their kind of PhD journey, they feel like an imposter. So there's notion of imposter syndrome. And there's also a really interesting comment there, a question there by Liam about rescue supervision. So I don't know which of those you have opportunity to share your advice on.
Look, I'll be quick. And Liam, is that Liam from Greater Manchester, Liam? Oh, Liam, we love you, brother. Okay, look, I'll be quick. First thing about imposter syndrome, before I became Dean of Graduate Research, I'd never heard of imposter syndrome, okay? So the first thing is, and I'm not doubting that that's how you feel. So firstly, I honour that you're feeling that and you're feeling like you're not the star of your own life. And I honour that. And what I want to say to you is that is not your fault. If you are moving through life feeling like an imposter, that is because I have failed. That is because the people around you have failed and not enabled you to feel centered and cared for and loved and respected. So it's about all of us, whoever that person is, let's all swarm fabulously around that person and show them what a remarkable, astounding, important person they are. You matter enormously. Your research matters enormously. Our institutions are in a real mess, and we need you to just be your best self, not who you think you should be, just be you, and you are enough, okay? Okay. And finally, to the legend that is Liam, my brother from another mother, Liam, rescue supervision. Look, 40% of students that start with one group of supervisors don't finish with them. So 40% of students lose a supervisor on the way, or the supervisor loses them. So rescue supervision is incredibly common. Can I say that the best supervisors, though, must do it? It is some of the toughest work one will ever do as a human. But again, the best supervisors must do that because they are taking a student that also is emotionally hurt. So yes, we've got to repair methodology and work out what's gone inverted commas wrong with the thesis, and all of that's easy to do. We can do that. But we've got to start with rescue supervision for caring for the person that is feeling discarded. So we start with the human interaction, and then we can deal with the research interaction.
Tara, we are just about out of time, and it pains me to say that because I'm sure, like everybody here on the meeting today, we could listen to you for hours. We have more questions and more insights to share, but on behalf of the School of Business and Creative Industries, on behalf of the research team that put this together, I'm thinking particularly about Claire and Saskia here, who couldn't be here, but thank you so much to them, and Kerry for stepping in, and Kit for stepping in, and all the people that have contributed to making today happen and to make it a success. And obviously, sincere thanks to you for your sage advice, your generosity of insight and support. We are ever so grateful to have you join us today. Thank you everybody for participating. There will be a recording of this available, so if you send us your email, if you're not on that initial kind of attendee list, please send us your information and we'll be able to send you a recording. So please, thank you, Tara. I hope you all have an amazing day, and good luck with the rest of your research journeys, whether that's as a supervisor or as a student. Thank you.
Our love to you. You are an amazing human, Gail. Thank you, Colin. Sunshine Coast is a special place. And for all our colleagues around the world, you are spectacular humans. Go out and continue to be amazing. Much love always, team. Always.